بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you guys for having me here to talk about preparing a khutbah. I was telling Sheikh Elali I stole this from a very nice lecture series on fiqh da'wah, and it was about public speaking. And of course the person doing that stole it from Reader's Digest, and basically it's based on Reader's Digest had an article called the ABCs of article writing. It also works for speech writing, so I'm going to use that and then also talk about using sources to prepare your khutbah, inshallah. For the ABCs of speech writing, we could say, it goes A to G. Okay, so they do ABCs to make it easy to remember because you can tie it to a letter. You associate it with a letter, you remember to do it. So the letter A, the first one is you want to have an arresting anecdote. Okay? So an anecdote is a kind of a short story or an illustration or something that will arrest your audience. And when we say arrest them, you're going to grab their attention. Okay, how many of you guys have been to a khutbah and it's boring for maybe the first 15 minutes or sometimes 20 minutes, and then finally it starts to pick up, and so you wake up and you start paying attention and you say, wow, this is really good. I wish it was exciting from the beginning. Then I would have been with it the whole time. You know, like at the end you say, oh wow, that was a really good half that I paid attention to because I was zoned out thinking about work or whatever. If you have something at the beginning that catches the people, they'll stay with you for the entire time. And so there's lots of good sources for getting your arresting anecdote. The first one is Sirah. There are lots of great stories from the life of the Prophet ﷺ. From the lives of other prophets, from the Sahaba. You can grab a story that will catch the people's attention and make them interested in what you're going to talk about. You can also tell a story from your personal life. You can tell a story that you've read or you've seen somewhere else, and that will get people interested in your topic. Of course, it has to relate to your whole topic. But it's really good to have this as A because it's the thing you want to start with. You want to grab the people's attention. You can also use statistics to get people's attention. There's a lecture by Imam Siraj Wahaj. He's kind of a famous speaker. He had a lecture about diseases of the heart. And so he started his arresting anecdote with a statistic. He said, the number one cause of death in America is heart disease. So then everybody listens, oh, what's going on? This is interesting. I didn't know that. Maybe some people didn't know that, you know, so they start to pay attention. And then you start talking about diseases of the heart. And so you can use those things to catch the people's attention. I know myself, I remember the youth, they remember the khutbah I did because I started talking about power couples at the beginning of it. Because that's really big in pop culture. And so I picked something from pop culture just to arrest the audience. And then the whole rest of the time I'm talking about something from the Sirah and getting lessons from their life. Okay, but I still picked something modern and fun, at least, and it really grabbed some people's attention because they said, oh, power couples, I know that. You know, they watch TV and watch the Beyonce, Jay-Z or whatever, it catches their attention, so then they're like, oh, what's he gonna talk about? And then they're with me the whole time. And I can teach them something important from the deen by getting their attention at the beginning. Okay, so that's A, arresting anecdote. For B, you wanna give the basic problem, okay? So what is this speech all about? Okay, what am I going to be talking about today? And you want to do that early on in your khutbah too. I know a lot of people too, if somebody tells me they liked my khutbahs, the main reason they tell me is because they say, I can follow you, it's organized. And the way you organize it and people can follow you, if you give them the basic problem right up front. Okay, so you say, we have there's a problem in our society with materialism, right off the bat. And so then you're going to talk about, balancing your dunya and your akhirah and so on. But you want to give them the basic problem right up front so they know where you're going with this speech. They can follow you better. Okay? Because sometimes you'll have things in there that are really interesting, really empowering, but at first glance it doesn't convey what the problem is. They're just going to say, oh, that's an interesting story or an interesting thing you're talking about. But if you give them the basic problem, then they can connect it, and they can make those connections, and they'll follow you better. Okay? So you want to give them a clear problem. It helps to focus your speech, and it helps your listener follow along with you. So that's B. So what was A? Anybody know? Arresting anecdote, right? And then B is basic problem. Okay. For C, you want to concern the listener. Okay, because people think to themselves, why should I care? What's in it for me? That's kind of a natural thing we have as human beings. Nafsi, nafsi, right? We just, what about me? Why me? Why does this concern me? Okay, so people want to know what's in it for me. So you want to concern the listener. You want to tell them why this problem is important to them. Okay, if you say there's a lack of, we have a lack of knowledge about Islam. Well, why does that concern me? I'm okay. I do my salah. I'm fine. I go to work. I don't bother anybody. You say, well, your kids might lose the deen because you don't know enough to convey it to them. Okay, well, I don't want my kids to lose the deen. Now I'm interested. It's concerning me. Okay? And also, when you tell them, you can give some examples of why it would concern them, because everybody knows someone like that, even if they don't want to admit themselves that they have a problem. They might know somebody who has that problem, or who they'll say, oh, somebody is materialistic. They might not admit it themselves, but they say, oh yeah, my brother-in-law is really too materialistic, and maybe I could help him, maybe I could talk to him. So you want to find a way to connect it to the listener. Because people want to know why they should care about what you're talking about. Letter D is dramatic details. And this is to generate emotion. Okay, and it's a documented scientific fact that they say that when you have an emotional experience with some new information, you will retain that information better. Okay, so that's what they teach us in education. They say make learning fun, make it engaging, grab the student's attention by making an emotional connection to the students. And the same thing with your audience. Okay? You want to generate emotion so that they remember better what you're teaching them. And like Ahmed talked about this, you want to touch the people's heart. You want to hit these emotions. You can touch them with joy. You can make people feel happy. You can make people smile during the khutbah. It's okay. It doesn't have to be so serious, that you can make people feel joy, and they'll remember that. And if you ask people, even if you ask them about a khutbah, you can ask them, what did you learn from the khutbah? What was it about? Maybe they can't tell you, but you can ask them, how did that khutbah make you feel? They'll tell you. I was bored, or they'll say, it was exciting, or it was empowering, or it made me feel sad. Something like that. It will connect with people, and it will stick with people better. You can make them feel sadness. You can make people feel anger. Okay, make people feel fear. And sometimes khatibs do too much of the fear. They're like, we're all going to hell. Everybody's going to hell. And they'll beat people over the head with, you're going to hell. You're going to hell. But fear is emotion that makes people. It motivates people. It gets people. Even disgust, you can make people, kind of like, oh, that behavior is disgusting. It can catch their attention and make them focus and listen to what you're saying. Okay. For the letter E, you have examples. Okay, so you want to give examples for what you're talking about. Okay, and you want to give multiple examples. Okay, because somebody might not understand your first example. They might not make the connection. So if you have multiple examples, like you say, you want to teach multiple ways this concept, so that they get it ingrained. So you could use statistics. Those are really powerful, but you want to be accurate, of course. You can use parables. And that's a story that, illustrates an example. It illustrates something. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses parables in the Quran. And you could use analogies. Also, those are used in the Quran too. You have analogies. You say, this is like this thing over here. Okay. And then also similes too, it's something more powerful. It's something linguistically that it captures people more. Like I could say, he's smart. Okay, that's nice. It's you understand what that means. But if I say, oh, this guy is like a computer, it's more. It gives you a picture in your mind. It's more vivid, and it captures your attention better. Okay, that's like a simile there. So use a lot of different examples to illustrate your point. For F, that's for facts on the other side. Okay? Because people, while they're listening to you, they'll start to, in their mind, they'll say, yeah, but what about this? They'll have something in their mind. And that can even block them getting your message. Okay, so when you do facts on the other side, you answer questions that people have in their mind. Like when, a lot of times, like we say, like the example is, somebody's talking about, not being materialistic, not focusing on the dunya. So you're talking about, all these examples you say, the Sahaba, they didn't focus on the dunya. Like they were getting away from the dunya. And then somebody in their mind, they're thinking, well, I know some Sahabi, they were very successful in the dunya. So they're going to be thinking the whole time, I don't think this is right. And then so they're missing the point of your message because they're thinking, he forgot something, or he's not right, it's not accurate. And so you want to say, but don't get me wrong, some of the Sahaba were very successful in the dunya, and they used that for their akhirah. And you talk about Uthman radiallahu anhu, how he used his money to help the Muslim community, help the Muslims, and thereby gain, help them get to Jannah, and so on. So you want to give the other side as well. You could present the other side's argument. Okay? And that lets people to get that off of their mind and then focus on what you're trying to say. You also can clear up misconceptions during this time. And this is really important because sometimes we have guests who come in and they're not Muslims and they're here for Jum'ah. So you want to clear misconceptions sometimes if there's something that's going to be a misconception about your topic. And this deflates resistance. So people sometimes are resistant to what you're trying to say. And we kind of had a discussion about that. They had a hadith, and because of some, people have some kind of feminist attitudes, they want to resist the hadith, resist your lesson. So if you present the other side and you say, you explain, then that's going to deflate that resistance and people will be more receptive to what you're trying to say. And then the last letter for the alphabet, the ABCs, is you want to goad your listener to action. Okay, so you've told them here's what it is, and you tell them why it's important, so what? You give them the basic problem, you've concerned them, and then they want to know, after that, they want to know, now what? What do I do? And so you want to give your audience something to do. Something they can take away from the khutbah and put into action. Because you could have a beautiful lesson, and everybody will say, oh, that was a wonderful lesson, and they don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know how to put that into action. They don't know, what should I do? You want to give them some steps to take after the khutbah. And you really want to limit it to one or two actions. Sometimes in khutbahs we like to give a list of things, because there's lots of things you could do to put things into action. You say you want to get closer to Allah. You can make a whole big long list of how to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what you want to do is, even if you give them some points from the list, you want to give them one thing to do, or two things maximum to do. So you said, if you forget everything else I've said, if you don't do anything else on this list, make sure you read the Quran regularly. Something like that, where you get them one concrete step they can take an action of. Okay? And that's what they say. If you get more than two, really people start to forget. Okay, you get the 3, 4, they forgot 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Because it's too much for the mind if they're not looking at a piece of paper, looking at a PowerPoint, and so on. So you got to keep it limited. Okay. And then the last part is how to utilize resources for your khutbah. Okay, so you want to definitely start with the Quran and the Sunnah. And I know some people, they have an idea they want to talk about, and then they try to go find ayat to make it fit the idea, or they try to find hadith to make it fit the idea. That's the hard way to do it. Okay, if you start with the Quran and you find some ayah and it triggers some idea and some topic in you, it's a lot easier to find other ayat that support that, other hadith that support that, and build your khutbah around the ayat of the Quran, or around the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's the easiest way to build your khutbah. If you try to do it the other way, it's really difficult to find something. And I can tell you that from experience and from hearing other people, they say the same thing. If you start with the Quran, it's easy to build your khutbah. If you have an idea, you say, I want to talk about Donald Trump, and now I'm going to try to find ayat that go fit what he's talking about or his policies or whatever, you're going to have a hard time doing that. Okay? It's much easier you have an ayah, and you start talking about that, and then you say, look, some people in the political world today are saying something it goes against this ayah or something. You'll be able to make it work better if you start there. Okay. For the seerah, you can find your arresting anecdotes there. You can find those stories that grab people's attention. You can find examples in the seerah of how the best Muslims that ever lived enacted these things, these principles. You can find your dramatic details in the seerah, because there are lots of powerful emotional stories in the seerah. Even stories of joy, stories of fear, stories that will make you sad, make you angry. Okay, those stories are all there. You can find sayings of the Sahaba, because this is the best generation. So they've said a lot of great things. And you'll find people, sometimes when they're speaking, Muslims are speaking about the deen, they'll quote non-Muslims. And if you research, some great Muslims said that way before that non-Muslim said it. And they said it better sometimes even. So start with the Muslims before you go looking for the non-Muslims to pull from. And also sayings of scholars. Our scholars have the most complete learning because they have the deen, they learn about the deen along with the dunya. So they have the most complete learning. They'll give you better quotes and more useful sayings. And they've analyzed these Quran and Sunnah and these texts already. You probably can't, you can't say it better than they've already said it. So if you can find a quote from a scholar, you're saving yourself work of trying to think of a way to explain this and present it. They've already done it. You can quote non-Muslims. You want to limit it. You want to keep it very relevant. And sometimes it helps you if you have like the youth or like some people that are in college or whatever. You can kind of attract them a little bit because they think you're really current and you're really well read. If you quote a non-Muslim, they'll say, oh wow, he's up to date, because sometimes some people have a wrong perception that, the people that learn about Islam, they're not up to date, they're not current. So you show them that if you do quote a non-Muslim, so that you can catch them and get them some buy-in in your speech. And then use statistics too, that they're interesting. I don't use a lot of statistics basically because I usually run out of time, and that's kind of lower on my list of things. You can see it's number 7 for me. But they are interesting, and they do grab people's attention. I'd like to try to get myself to use them more because they do catch people, and they're interesting. But I usually do this order. I mean, when I'm going through, I build like this. So I mean, that's the way I follow myself personally. And then I have 2 simple rules to keep in mind when you're given a speech anytime, whether it's a khutbah, whether you're giving a da'wah speech to a group of non-Muslims or whatever. I keep these 2 simple rules in mind for public speaking. One is, tell the people what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. They will retain it better. They'll feel like they really got the message. They'll remember what you said better that way. Okay? You're setting them up to hear it, they hear it, and then you remind them what they heard. Okay? And then the other thing is, you want to tell people these 3 things in your speech. You want to tell them, here's what it is, here's the topic, here's the problem. You want to tell them why, so what, so here's what, and then so what is why. Okay, why does it concern me? You want to concern them. And then you tell them, now what? You give them the action, you goad them to action. Okay, make sure you get those 3 things in when you're giving a speech. The people will feel that they got something out of it. Because they'll say, I understood the problem, it is a problem for me, and I know what to do about it. Then people feel satisfied with your speech. That's the end of my presentation. So, anybody have any questions or anything? I can. Yeah.
For examples, you mentioned parables, analogies, and proximities. Is there a difference between these 3?
Yeah.
Is there a priority which you would put on one over the other?
I wouldn't put a priority on any of them. There is a difference. An analogy is where you take something maybe that's kind of abstract and you try to give an analogy to help people get a concrete picture of it. So I'm trying to think of an analogy right now. Off the top of my head, of course, I should have one ready. But I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's when you say, like I always say this, okay, when I'm talking about Judgment Day, when I talk to non-Muslims, like I'm the principal, so I train my staff about Islam, and the non-Muslims, they're teachers, so it's easy for me to use teaching analogies, okay? So when I talk about, our life as a human being, we talk about that we live for a time and then we die. So and people always ask that in history. We say, well, why do we die? Our cells make new cells. Why all of a sudden do they stop doing that and we start to die? And you say, well, because this life is a test. And so I give the analogy. I say, just like any test you give in a class, if you let the kid take the test forever, when are you going to grade that test? The test is never ending. It's not really a test. You can't collect it and grade it and give a grade and move forward. So if that's an analogy to help them understand this concept of why we have to die. I give it related to their profession. Okay, so if you have a parable, that's where you tell a story to illustrate a point. Okay, so I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head again. Let's see. Well, like we have a lot of folk tales and fables. They have they're parables really, because they'll teach you a lesson. Like you have the story of the guy with his sons. They said, each son take a stick and they all can break it easy, one stick. It's so weak. And he said, now get a group of sticks, put them together, and now try to break it. He said, you can't do it. And so the father says, see, this is why you need to be unified. And that's a good one for Muslims. If we're unified, people can't break us like they want, whenever they want to. We're stronger together. And that's a parable. A simile is just a linguistic thing where it makes it more powerful than, like I said, you just say, he's strong. Okay, but if you say, oh, he's a rhinoceros, then, oh, it's something that he's like a rhinoceros, then it kind of sticks with you. It's more vivid, you know. It's an Arabic rhetoric tool too, where you, instead of just saying like, he's great, you say, oh, he's a full moon, you know, he shines and is bright, you know. So it makes it more vivid and sticks with people.